Welcome to UN Insider. I'm Elaine Reyes at the United Nations headquarters in New York. Join us as we delve into the world's most pressing issues and learn how the people inside work toward a better future for everyone around the world.
Coming up on UN Insider.
A negotiated solution is the only way out.
Tackling the biggest problems around the globe. From violent conflicts and power struggles,
There has to be a security force of some kind in Haiti.
to the startling impacts of climate change.
People in the Caribbean live with anxiety every year because we know that the hurricanes are coming.
Is adopted.
A conversation with the President of the UN General Assembly. Next.
"2023 has been a year of conflict and challenges. Here at the UN, there's been a flurry of activity as diplomats tackle the world's biggest problems, from climate change to violent clashes. On this special episode of UN Insider, we sit down with the man leading the current UN session, General Assembly President Dennis Francis. President Francis, how would you reflect on the first few months of your term, and what do you hope this body accomplishes in 2024?
The first few months, I would have to say, unexpectedly tumultuous. Lots going on in the international system, the international political system. Of course, we've had the war between Israel and Hamas. That has really been the headliner in terms of disruption of peace and security, international peace and security, though we've had, before that, the situation in Ukraine. And then, of course, there's the situation in Africa, where so many of the countries on the continent are now engaged in internal conflict. So the first 2 or so months of the presidency has been challenging, but the challenge is not so much for the presidency as it is for the entire system, the international system. And what do I hope to accomplish for 2024? Well, for 2024, we've got a really big process underway, and that is the Summit of the Future, where the UN, in conjunction with stakeholders, and this is very important, stakeholders right across the spectrum will sit down to come up with a plan of action to address the pressing global challenges that we are confronting now, but not just now, those that are on the horizon and which will require transformational change. So things like artificial intelligence, for example, will fall within the purview of the Summit of the Future. Things like digitalization, questions of health and education, that really will make a difference in terms of people's daily lives.
As you mentioned, the situation in Gaza has really dominated headlines here at the United Nations and around the world. Thousands of people are dead. The situation has been very violent, and the UN has been pushing for a ceasefire. You've personally met with relatives of those taken hostage by Hamas. Why do you think this situation is more difficult to resolve than ever?
Well, the fact is that this, as you know, is a long-standing conflict. It's got layers and layers of issues on top of it. And there have been frequent resolutions by the Security Council and by the General Assembly, most of which have not been implemented over the years. This particular situation is complicated because illegal activity cannot resolve disputes. So, for example, the decision by Hamas to do what it did is not a decision that can be supported. It ought not to have done that. Now, Hamas is not a country. We must bear that in mind. It's a group. But it is not the right thing to kidnap people and take them as hostage away from their families. On the other hand, while it is true that the Israelis have got the right of self-defense, the prescriptions on the conduct of war denies the right of anyone to be excessive and disproportionate in their response. And more than that, underscores the necessity to protect civilians in conflict. And we have seen where too many civilians have lost their lives in Gaza. So there are all sorts of complications there, emotional, historical, psychological. Terror, of course, is not an easy thing. And of course, there are the underlying political considerations in a very complex region. But I am hopeful because once there is a dialogue between the combatants, between the parties, the possibilities for resolution come onto the table. This is not going to be an easy process because it's been in existence for a very long time. Many have tried in the past, come close to success, but then there's been a collapse. However, a negotiated solution is the only way out that will guarantee the Israelis their right to live within secure borders in peace and security, and guarantee the Palestinians their right for a homeland. And so as the United Nations, we adhere to and promote the two-state solution because it's really the only credible way for lasting peace and security to the Palestinian question.
We know that more than 100 UN aid workers have been killed in Gaza. That's more than any other conflict in UN history. Will this loss of life impact missions and operations in the future?
I'm sure it will, individually, not institutionally or organizationally, because it's very difficult. I read a WhatsApp message, I think it was on Saturday morning, posted by the Director General of the World Health Organization, in which his words were to the effect, my staff and I have been saddened because finally a member of our team was killed this morning alongside her 6-month-old baby and her husband and daughter, all in one family. These are real people. They've got friends, they've got colleagues who survive, and therefore it cannot be an easy thing individually going to one of these conflict zones without thinking, will I return to my family? Consider the angst and the anxiety that families will feel if family members are deployed in such contentious zones of conflict. But institutionally and organizationally, the UN remains fully committed, and the staff remains fully motivated to carry out their responsibilities and to do the humanitarian work consistent with the principles of the UN Charter and with the Universal Declaration on Human Rights.
Within the UN, at the Security Council, and even outside the United Nations, China has been working with the international community in many different ways, different outreach, to find stability in the Middle East. Foreign Minister Wang Yi recently paid a visit to United Nations headquarters. And for you as a longtime career diplomat, how important are the different voices, the different perspectives when it comes to trying to solve major conflicts?
It's extremely important because conflicts are not unidimensional. And that's part of the complication of the Gaza conflict, as indeed is the case in Ukraine. There are layers and layers and layers. There's precedent. There are pre-existing situations that trigger countries to behave in certain ways. And so it's very important that all the voices are heard. Everyone, that's the nature of multilateralism.
Small or large.
Small or large, it is the core of multilateralism, that durable solutions, permanent solutions, are not feasible and cannot be imposed by a few. You need the collaborative voices of all to accept and to take ownership for the outcomes and the solutions that will resolve long-standing contentious issues. And so that is the magic, I think is the word, the magic of multilateralism. It's never perfect. Multilateralism never makes a claim to be perfect. What it does claim to do is to avoid tensions and to make everyone feel comfortable that they can live with a result that is suboptimal but workable. That's the magic.
Coming up,
I did not leave Haiti feeling hopeless. In fact, I left feeling hopeful.
UN Insider.
Whether it's about your education, the home you live in, or the items you buy, your money has a story to tell. Because every business story is a human story. Global Business.
The UN has deployed 71 peacekeeping operations since 1948. There are currently 12 active operations. China is one of the largest contributors to peacekeeping. More than 2,200 Chinese personnel are currently involved in UN peacekeeping missions. Maintaining international peace and security is a key mission of the UN. The United Nations is working to address conflict and instability in several countries. I asked General Assembly President Dennis Francis about some global hotspots. President Francis, you were recently in Haiti to observe the situation there. Being from the region, you have deep knowledge. You also represented your country in Haiti. What did you see and learn during this visit?
I saw the strength and resilience of the Haitian people. I saw people attempting to take charge of their lives and not to be victims. Though the fact of the matter is, in many ways, they are victims. They are victims of gang violence. They are victims of excess. But be that as it may, I saw Haitians out and about, many of them creating their own employment through selling stuff on the street, whether it's fruit, clothing, items of furniture, handicraft, artwork. People are out. I also met while I was there with representatives of the political parties and of civil society. And while the political situation is difficult, there is no doubt about it, they're in a difficult situation. I have to say that I did not leave Haiti feeling hopeless. In fact, I left feeling hopeful because I did have good conversations, both with the political parties that are very committed to their country. There is a strong patriotism among Haitians, particularly the political elites, that I think is the first ingredient in repairing this country and re-democratizing it so that it can take its rightful place alongside its CARICOM brothers and sisters in the international system. And that will have to be the foundation upon which to build sustainable development so that the people of Haiti can thrive and do very well.
And how are the Haitians about accepting outside help? We know that there is this multinational security force that the UN Security Council recently agreed upon. Is a security force the only answer?
Well, there has to be a security force of some kind in Haiti, because without it, the marauding gangs literally terrorize the people. They use rape and sexual violence to intimidate women. People have been abducted off the street in certain parts of the capital. And therefore, there's a general sense of a lack of security, personal security in Haiti. And so there needs to be some assistance provided to the Haitian police force, which is trying its best, but simply is not able to execute the job because of lack of numbers. There simply are not sufficient police officers to be able to undertake the task. And so outside help is necessary. Now, with respect to the question of how the people of Haiti feel about the proposal to bring in an external police authority, I have to tell you, they are very expectant. They would like it to happen sooner or later. My sense is that they will give their full support to that force because they are mentally tired of being held hostage in their homes, unable to send their kids to school in certain areas, unable to go to the markets to do their shopping. So I expect that there will probably not be a whole lot of problems in terms of interaction between the force and the Haitian domestic population.
As we know, there are other many hotspots around the world, and that's where UN peacekeeping comes in. China is one of the biggest financial contributors to the UN peacekeeping forces, as well as providing troops. How important is China's role in UN peacekeeping efforts around the world?
I think it's very important. Peacekeeping was designed as a means of intervening between, of course, in conflict situations where there is a need to keep the two sides apart because of the festering problem. And China is one of those countries that has always committed to peacekeeping. Without peacekeeping, our world would be a very, very different place. There would be even more conflicts raging than exists now. And alongside that, increased loss of life and damage to property. So China's contribution to peace is an extremely important dimension. It is a very costly business, I have to tell you, peacekeeping. It's costly in terms of dollars and cents, and it can also be costly in terms of lives lost. And so we need those members who are able to maintain their commitment to peacekeeping, because without it, we would be really living in a very, very different world.
Coming up,
it's really a question of which of the islands are going to be hit and maybe have their total economy destroyed.
UN Insider.
We are CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Climate warnings are becoming more dire. Can the world find a way to keep global temperature rise under control before we reach a tipping point? I asked General Assembly President Dennis Francis about climate action. President Francis, I know you're from Trinidad and Tobago,
Yes.
and no doubt over the years you've seen your home country change and evolve with climate change.
Yes.
What have you seen over the years?
In Trinidad and Tobago and in most of the Caribbean, where I'm from, there are only 2 seasons of the year. The rainy season, which starts in July and ends in November, and the dry season, which starts in December and goes to June. And over the years, increasingly, the dry season has become the wet season, and the wet season has become the dry season. This is, I remember once thinking that even the vegetation is confused. It used to be, for instance, that mangoes would be very plentiful and very cheap in August, September, October, November. Now, you can hardly find mangoes, and when you do, extremely, extremely expensive. So this has had an impact on the cost of living, but also physically. You drive around the country and you can actually see land being lost to the sea through erosion, the encroachment of the sea. There's a part of the country on the east end, in a place called Manzanilla, which incidentally consists of maybe 10 or 15 miles of coconut palms. You're driving for 10 or 15 miles in the middle of a road fringed with coconut palms. And it's called Coconut Cathedral because they come together. That road has had to be rebuilt on at least 3 occasions in the last 10 years because of encroachment from the sea. So we are living with the effects of climate change. Flooding, sporadic flooding, has become a major, major problem in the capital city of Port-au-Spain and in some of the other smaller towns. And it's unseasonal. It's unseasonal. Government is having to provide assistance and support to households to recover from sporadic flooding.
President Francis, do you feel that mechanisms such as COP28 will make a difference and we'll see climate action by 2030? SDG goal number 13.
My hope is, my desire is that it would be so, that we would see a difference by 2030. Normally, every day, I'm wearing it. My 1.5 degree pin. I've worn this pin every day, even before I became President of the General Assembly. Because the 2 degrees threshold for global warming above post-industrial level, pre-industrial levels, will not suit small island developing states. In fact, it will imperil them. What we need is a 1.5 degrees. And even with that, it is acknowledged that the temperature of the global atmosphere will rise a little bit above. But our chances of survival would be significantly improved by maintaining the 1.5 degree threshold. So I'm hopeful that this will be a really transformational outcome at this COP. And by that I mean increased climate finance, increased allocation to adaptation, because most of the money in climate finance at the moment really is directed at mitigation. However, mitigation, as important as it is not going to prevent or avert the catastrophes that come with having to rebuild public infrastructure every 2 or 3 years, as is the case in the Caribbean when the Atlantic hurricane season hits. People in the Caribbean live with anxiety every year because we know that the hurricanes are coming, and it's really a question of which of the islands are going to be hit and maybe have their total economy destroyed in a space of maybe 4 or 5 hours while the hurricane passes. So increased climate finance, increased funding for adaptation, And of course, the issue of loss and damage, the capitalization of that fund. Extremely important. Means of implementation is what is needed to assist and support the most vulnerable countries who, incidentally, as you know, contributed the least to the problem of climate change. The carbon footprint of Caribbean countries is minuscule in relation to the carbon footprint of the major emitters. In fact, there are some countries that have a negative carbon footprint, Suriname being one of those. So we are there's a sense in which we are at risk of being punished twice. We've been punished because we are the victims of climate change that we did not cause, but also we are being punished because the funding necessary to assist and support us to cope and to manage in this new situation has not been made available at the pace and on the scale necessary for us to cope.
President Francis, thank you so much for joining us.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.
I'm Elaine Reyes at UN headquarters in New York. Thanks for being a UN Insider.